Welcome to Our Culture to the World. Come with me and meet new people and share their wonderful experiences on this episode of Our Culture to the World. My guest today is Gavin Mendonça. And Gavin, please introduce yourself to our viewers and tell us about yourself.
Hello, everybody. Melvin, thanks so much for having me. My name is Gavin, and I am a folk and rock musician here in Guyana. And I have been dedicated to contributing to the preservation of our folk songs and culture through music. And I've been able to take Guyanese folk songs all over the world in the last couple of years. And now I'm happy to share it with you and your audience.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And yes, and I am so excited to hear about this and hear about all you do. And tell me something about, were you always into music from a young child? What is your musical background?
Not really, but music was always around me. Ironically, I never used to listen to rock music in high school. I used to listen to Eminem.
Okay.
So in late high school, I went to the Bishop's High School, and I enjoyed writing poems. So I was into poetry, and I guess that's where the creative juices started to flow. And when I got out of high school in 2008, I started UG, University of Guyana. And I met a few friends there who wanted to start a band. And by then, I started to listen to rock music because it was around me. My sister used to listen to rock music. My brother used to listen to rock music. My uncle actually used to play in a rock band throughout the 90s as a drummer. So rock music was always around me. And so I started to listen to it. And then I met more friends who listened to it as well. And then I met two friends that wanted to start a band,
Mm-hmm.
and none of us knew to play the guitar, but we were excited about it. So I remember my mom and dad took me to Burbies. We went to Burbies on a family trip, maybe in 2010, and I saw a very cheap guitar hanging in a store. And I was like, you know what, I can get this guitar. And I had just gotten my first bank card, my debit card. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, Mommy, I want to buy this guitar. And they let me buy it. And that was it. I blew all my savings on this guitar. And from then on, I fell in love with it, and I knew that music was my calling. So I taught myself to play the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
I taught myself guitar, and now I am a professional musician.
Okay, okay, very good, very good. Self-taught, all of that. Wow, yes. So, and interestingly, rock music, um, we're gonna talk a little bit more about that later because generally when people think about the Caribbean, they don't think rock, right? They maybe think like calypso, soca, reggae, that kind of music. But we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But you, when you introduced yourself, you spoke about folk music and how committed you are to the preservation of our folk music. And why is this so? How did this interest in Guyanese folk music begin?
Right. So after becoming a rock musician and starting a punk rock band here in Guyana, and then joining a heavy metal band called Feed the Flames, who I'm now still with. And with that rock band, we've toured the Caribbean, well, Trinidad, Suriname, and so on. We produce our own shows in Guyana. But let's say between 2011 and 2014, we play a lot of our own self-produced rock shows in places like Sidewalk Cafe and at Jerry's, real underground stuff. Because, like you said, rock music is not very popular in Guyana, but
Mhm.
there's still a very cool rock scene that's kind of underground but very community oriented.
Oh.
So we play a lot of rock songs, cover music, cover songs, and write a few originals. And people would always compare me to sounding like, well, the bands that I liked at the time, like Blink 182 and Sum 41, and say, hey, you sound just like them. And it was true because I used to emulate them. I
Mm.
used to mimic them in a sense.
Right.
But the more professional I got in my journey as a musician, the more I wanted my own identity to be portrayed through my music. So
Mm.
instead of people telling me, hey, you sound like this American rock band or this American rock band, I wanted to sound like a Guyanese rock musician. So
Mm.
I started thinking, well, how can I do that? So I started writing a few songs. The first one was one called The Great Rebellion, which is a song about coffee. and the 1763 slave rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrote a song called By the Tides, which is like a tour of Georgetown. And in those songs, I used Guyanese words, Guyanese slangs. The way we talk is how I would sing.
Exactly.
And I kind of had to unlock that because I was programmed. I programmed myself to sound a specific way, a generic way as a rock musician. But then I started to incorporate my own voice really and truly into songs. And then to elevate that further, I got involved in the Rupununi Music and Arts Festival, which is a 3-day world music camping festival in the Rupununi. Okay. So in 2015, we called it Rockview Lodge in Anai. And while I was there, the organizers were like, hey, we want some Guyanese music. We want you come and play Guyanese music. So I thought to myself, well, how can I still be a rock musician and please these people that want Guyanese music? So I decided to do rock versions of popular Guyanese songs. With my band, we did Not a Blade of Grass by Dave Martins.
Right.
And the first folk song I did was Bamboo Fire. So we took these traditional Guyanese songs and we just played it as a rock band. So we had the heavy drumming and the loud guitars, but I sang like a Guyanese, and that's where I invented Creole rock. So I came up with the term Creole rock, which is my own genre of music that fuses folk music, our culture, our dialect with rock and roll. So that's where that planted the seed for becoming a real Guyanese musician. And then at that same festival, I met Chucky, who is the head of Buxton Fusion Drumming School. And it was right there at the festival that my dear uncle Dio, who used to manage Buxton Fusion, said, hey, you with your guitar and Chucky on his djembe, y'all should go and play some folk songs together. And literally, as impromptu as it was, we didn't rehearse or anything. We just went and did a set of folk songs. And I immediately felt connected to myself in the purest fashion, where it was a moment of enlightenment, a moment of realization who I am and what I need to do as a musician. So with my rock band covering the rock songs, the Guyanese songs in a rock style, and me now learning and being exposed to real Guyanese folk music by getting involved with Chucky, I started to appreciate it more. I never had an appreciation for Guyanese folk music because it just wasn't around. So after 2015, between 2015 and 2018, Chucky and I would do 1 or 2 performances together. But at the end of 2018, we really decided, hey, let's work together and let's do folk songs. Let's play folk music, because I realized the importance that young people and that cultural practitioners have, the responsibility we have as guardians of our culture. Exactly. So I made a decision to invest more time and more energy into cultural preservation. So Chucky and I began working on a Folk It Up project where we found a book of 100 Guyanese folk songs that was produced in the 90s. And I just started to learn them all. Bamboo Fire, Sitaira, Small Days, Economy, Morning Neighbor, Timber Brook. And I just started to learn them and play them with Chucky. And we started to record them. So then we started to record this recording project where we want to record all of Guyana's folk songs, but because it's so much, it needs to be done in a series. Right. So we released Volume 1 in 2019, and just last year, we released Folk It Up Volume 2. My background, my sunflower blurring it, but this is Folk It Up Volume 2, which we record parts in the Iwakrama rainforest. And now we're about to record Folk It Up Volume 3. Again, all just trying to contribute to the preservation of our folk songs.
Okay. So, and those recordings were, you did them in Guyana?
Yes, at Cross Color Records.
Oh, okay. You really answered in explaining how you got into the folk, and you were, you're fusing or the blending the folk and the rock. You answered some other questions I had, because I was wondering if you were exposed to Guyanese folk music growing up, and you know, you said no, it just wasn't around. Because I remember, you know, back in the day when I was going to school, you know, we knew our folk songs, and sometimes we had certain days at school when we would sing them, maybe like on a Friday, or if it was a kind of some kind of national holiday. And so we just knew them, we knew all of them, the ones that you mentioned. So but then, you know, my children are close to your age, maybe just a little older than you. And I remember, you know, I could trying to think back, I don't remember them actually hearing them singing these songs. They might have heard some of them from us or from other kinds of exposure, but not knowing them the way we knew them, those of my generation when we were growing up. So I'm glad you explained how you actually got into folk music, and it's really interesting. I like the fact that you said, you know, you were able to first of all bring your Guyanese self to the rock scene, you know, create your own voice, and then now you are really working on this project to preserve our culture, because you know, we find there's so many aspects of our culture that we're losing. So I'm really happy with what you're doing, and I like to offer my support in whatever way. But and I'm hoping that at least in a little way with this being able to, you know, I know you have other means of exposure, but this could be another way in which people could learn about the you know, what you and Chucky are doing. Okay, so you said when you were growing up, like you know, there really wasn't that much, you didn't know too much about folk music. What about now? Now, in terms of the level of interest in folk music in Guyana right now?
So it's not that I was never exposed to it. Like I did know certain songs like Bamboo Fire and Jane and Gage and Auntie Bess and
Mm-hmm.
Small Days. Those have always been the most popular folk songs.
Right, and you would
And
hear them on the radio, I guess. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
you know, and we hear them at cultural events and that kind of
mm-hmm.
stuff. Um, and then I met musicians throughout the years, folk musicians like Ezzy Rockcliffe and the Yoruba singers
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
the Kanokwa singers and you know, see them at concerts and so on. So there was some amount of exposure to it. As I again became more professional and started getting gigs in certain places and so on. Um, but still I noticed a lack of appreciation for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was a spark, not to toot my own horn, but there was a revival of interest in Guyanese folk songs when my band started to do them in a rock style.
Uh,
Because we were playing gigs at the University of Guyana during Career Day and other events where young people were there. And once we bust out Not to Blade of Grass, it was a big deal. So young people
mm-hmm.
had a new reason to appreciate folk music because it was being presented in a more in a format that they would more readily accept
Mm-hmm.
in the
Mm-hmm.
form of a modern take on it.
Oh,
So
okay.
I believe it kind of stimulated the revival of appreciation for it. And then in 2019, Chucky and I decided to start playing folk music in as many public spaces as we could. So every Friday for the whole of 2019 up to the pandemic, we would play every Friday at the Courtyard Mall on Robb Street,
Mm-hmm.
between Camp and Wellington. We would go, we would set up a little PA system right there on the side of the avenue. And for about 2 hours, we would just play Guyanese folk songs. And hundreds of people would be walking, would be passing in buses, passing in cars. And our objective was to just get Guyanese folk music back out into the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
So I could that people passing by were interested in what we were doing. The older folks were tapping and singing along,
Right.
almost as if we were hearing this right now. And young people and young children passing by were interested because here's this guy with a guitar and a guy with a drums playing music on the side of the street, and that's not common here in Guyana.
Mm-hmm.
We call it busking in every other part of the world. So we were just getting Guyanese music out in the public, not for any financial gain, not for any kind of fame, just for the simple fact of getting it back into society,
Right.
giving people the opportunity to appreciate it. Because I believe one of the reasons it's not appreciated anymore is because people just don't get the opportunity to appreciate it.
Mhm.
So I noticed a little shift in the way people perceive and react to folk songs in the last 3 years, 4 years since we've been really playing folk music. So and it has been great to see that people are now finding a new appreciation for our folk songs. And I mean, I don't know how many other young people, if any, are doing what Chucky and I do, but that's not the point. We are passionate about what we do. We love to do it, and that's why we do it.
Great, great, great. And keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. Yes. Um, and I really like the that passion that's driving you, and it's going to, I'm sure it's going to help some other young ones to get develop more of that interest, and maybe um work on doing the similar things to what you're doing. Um, why do you feel that it's important to keep this aspect of our culture alive?
Yeah, I think it's important because it's who we are as a people. It is our identity, and it also is important to our history as a people. So I find that, there's so much Western influence and foreign influence on our TV shows, on our televisions, on our radios, on in any form of media, on social media. Most of the content that especially young Guyanese indulge in is foreign content.
Mm,
Um, like I notice even small children who are now learning to read are using TV shows and YouTube videos where it's an American talking to them. So when they start talking, they automatically develop and mimic the voices that are teaching them.
mhm.
So I think it's very important for us to maintain identity and our folk songs and culture and music is will always be a pillar, major pillars of society that influence the general atmosphere of a people and a place. So it's very important that we maintain our identity. And one of the ways I believe we can do that is by indulging in folk music. Because if you sing we folk songs and if you talk about our stories, you have to be invoking a certain Guyaneseness inside of you.
Exactly, exactly. Very good, very well said. You know what? Before we go on to talk about how you're taking our Guyanese folk music to the world, I just wanted to remind our viewers that this is our culture to the world, and I'm sure you're finding value in this discussion. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel and share the video with others. But before we're going to talk about how you take Guyanese folk music to the world. But before we do that, I love your background. Tell me about that sunflower.
Yeah, so that is a giant sunflower that is currently in bloom just outside my yard, in my garden.
Mhm.
So, when the lockdown came, the pandemic came, I was on a high because I had already started touring. I've been to the UK, to the US, to China, and I was just in New Orleans in February 2020. Again, living my dreams while also doing something good for my country
Mhm.
because I had attended a conference called Folk Alliance International, which is a gathering for folk musicians. And like most places I go to, festivals and events around the world, I am always the first Guyanese to always participate. So wherever I go is gold to them. So I
Wow.
got back home at the end of February 2020. And in the midst of the outbreak of the pandemic, I was actually in New York in it all.
Oh,
And when I got back home, few days later is when all the lockdowns start. Now
mhm.
I had major plans for 2020. I was invited to gigs and festivals in as far as Australia. And I had plans to travel the world even more in 2020. But now all of a sudden it feels like I was on the brink of achieving my dreams and it was just snatched away from me
Wow.
by COVID like
Mhm.
everybody else. So, it bummed me out. I was like, oh, shucks. Well, now I can't tour. I can't play music live anywhere. I don't have a day job because I'm fully committed to music. It's
Mhm.
my life. So all of a sudden, it was like, how can I live my life if I can't go and play music for people? So, life got a little depressing. It took a little downward turn.
Mhm.
And I had all this free time on my hands. And with the lockdown here in Guyana, and we had elections happening at the same time. So it was a very
Oh, yeah.
dark time.
Mm.
And you couldn't go to the market too often and stuff was getting more expensive. So here I am in my yard. We have a very small backyard, but it's just grass. And I thought to myself, a friend and I actually, a friend by the name of Andrew Campbell, who makes local chocolate from beans sourced from Mabaruma and the Northwest and so on. And we started spending some time together. And he was like, hey, we should get into gardening. We got all this free time. We got his space because he was staying at a place with a lot of yard space. And we just decided to start gardening. We
Mm.
started growing. The very first things we started to grow was like Corilla and Bora and okra, and I decided, hey, I'll start a kitchen garden at home as well to help my parents, to help my family,
Mhm.
because we can't go to the garden as much. And we started to research and get into food security. So I took the initiative to start planting my own food during the lockdown so that I could provide for my family. So we didn't have to risk going to the market just to get
Right.
some okra,
Mm.
right? So it turns out I had a green thumb because 6 weeks after planting my first set of seeds, we were harvesting
Wow.
okra and coriander.
Good.
And it became a passion of mine. And I found I have a philosophy in life and that I've applied in music. And I have this short film called How to Build a Tree House, which I did at Kite Falls.
How to build
And
a.
that's how to build a tree house.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Um, So it's a short film, a music video short film style I did at Kite Falls in incorporating Patamona folklore and language.
Huh?
And this song I wrote since 2012 maybe. The song is about having a dream. And imagine that dream is a seed. And if you plant that seed and you water it, you nourish it, you take care of it, you invest time and energy into it, that seed becomes a seedling, becomes a plant, becomes a tree that literally could provide sustenance for you. You could build a house in the tree, you could live in the tree, you can get food from the tree.
Imagery, yes.
And so I consider dream to be a seed. And if I plant that seed and I take care of it, it could blossom into the most beautiful garden. So I
Mhm.
was never into gardening prior to the pandemic. But here I was in a position where I had all of this creative energy inside of me. And I'm getting a little weird now. So I'm into things like very metaphysical and esoteric things. And I believe in alchemy, which is the transmutation of energies from one form to the next. So I had all of these emotions inside of me. And emotions are a mixture of chemicals and energy inside of the human body. And it was fear, it was anxiety, it was depression, it was sadness, it was anger, it was hurt, and it was consuming me. So what I did is I took all of those emotions and I converted it into a garden. I took all of those emotions and I invested it into something positive.
Positive,
And
right.
I turned it into something else. So I would spend hours, 20 hours of each day in the garden, planting seeds, getting my hands dirty, reading up on care for the garden. And I just started gardening. And the more I gardened, the backyard just turned into, and I'll send you some pictures.
Okay.
The back turned into a beautiful garden. And the more I grew stuff, and we started growing everything. Corilla, okra, bora, squash, bolange,
Mhm.
peppers, passion fruit,
Wow.
everything to think about. And then I started to think, well, hey, let me grow flowers as well. So we started growing marigold and zinnia and that kind of stuff. And then I went to a local store and I found sunflower seeds. And I was like, let me try with the sunflower seeds. And again, it was magic to see these sunflowers from a tiny seed to this tree and seedling turn into an 8 foot giant with a
Wow.
giant face like this. And to
Mhm.
me, it was proof that when you believe in something, you believe in yourself, and you pour the most positive intentions into what you're doing, you can create life, and you could sustain yourself, and you could just be happy. And that's what my garden does for me.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Very good. Very good. I love that sunflower. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Thanks for watching part 1. Be sure to watch part 2. Now Gavin is going to take us out with some music.
Timber, timber heavy load. Timber, timber, timber heavy load. Timber, timber, timber heavy load. Timber, timber, timber heavy load. Oh, timber broke me bucket my yard. Timber broke me bucket my yard. Oh, timber broke me bucket my yard. Oh, timber broke me bucket my yard. Oh, timber twist me hip at my yard. Timber twist me hip at my yard. Oh, timber, timber, timber heavy load. 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 Timber rock me bucket in my yard. Oh, timber drop me foot at my yard. Oh, timber drop me at my yard. Oh, timber knock me hip at my yard. Oh, timber twist me hip at my yard. Oh, timber rock me hip at my yard. Oh, timber, timber, timber heavy load. Timber, timber, timber heavy load. Timber, timber, timber heavy load. Nah, timber, timber, timber heavy load. Jackie! Oh, timber, timber, timber heavy load. Timber, timber, timber heavy load. Timber, timber, timber heavy load now. Timber, timber, timber heavy